Hello and a very warm welcome to our 25th Rare REV-inar. I'm Nicola Miller, Editor-in-Chief and Creative Director at Rare Revolution, and I'm supported today by my colleague Becky Pender, who as always is working on our tech in the background. Sponsorship for today's Rare REV-inar is provided by Blueprint Medicines, a Sanofi company, as part of an arm's length sponsorship agreement, and it will actually consist of a series of 4 Rare REV-inars throughout 2026. Today, I'm really delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel who'll be talking us through the before, during and after diagnosis of mastocytosis. So welcome to Shauna Hull, an advocate from the USA who was diagnosed with both cutaneous and systemic mastocytosis following a 12-year diagnostic odyssey. And Dr. Polina Pyatilova, who's a physician scientist based in Germany, whose work focuses on mast cell-driven diseases with a strong emphasis on digital health, real-world evidence and patient-centred care. Welcome and thank you both for joining us. So we're going to dive straight in and start looking at life before diagnosis, so early signs, red flags and diagnostic delays. And perhaps, Polina, if you can turn your camera back on now, and Shauna, I'm going to come to you first, Polina.
Hi, Nicole.
There.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Nice seeing you.
So we're going to come to you first, and I'm going to sort of, for those who are new to the topic and joining us, who perhaps don't know so much about mastocytosis, can you explain the sort of the main differences between the cutaneous and the systemic mastocytosis, just to sort of really set the scene for us?
Yes, sure. So we know that mastocytosis. What means mastocytosis? It means that there are many mast cells, and we all also have, every person has mast cells, but by mastocytosis we know that there is a small genetic mutation, so that's why they don't need other factors to grow the mast cells, so they can grow without anything because of this activation all the time, and then the patients can have many mast cells. And the difference, what you ask between cutaneous and systemic mastocytosis, where this mast cells sit, so it can be only in the skin, so then we say it's cutaneous, but I think we will not talk about this today, because cutaneous mastocytosis, I would say it's a little bit even a different disorder. So we see it in children, and there in children it's really common, and we have these mutated mast cells only in the skin. But we are here today to discuss also mastocytosis in adults, and here I would say it's almost about systemic mastocytosis, because mast cells, they are, as other immune blood cells, they are being produced somewhere, and it's bone marrow, so they are already come not from the skin, they already come within the system from the bone marrow. So it means that not only skin but also other organs can be involved. The skin also can be involved, but this is maybe not the first organ which is involved. And we know that in adult patients there are also many different subtypes of mastocytosis. That's why patients also can have these mast cells sitting in the skin or in the gastrointestinal tract or in the bones, or a little bit of everywhere in the system. So then we are talking about systemic mastocytosis, mostly indolent systemic mastocytosis. So this is the most frequent form of systemic mastocytosis. What means it could be not very dangerous, but the patients also experience a lot of different variety of symptoms because of these mast cells sitting in these organs.
Brilliant, thank you. And if I understand it right, there's indolent and non-indolent sort of states within that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have 2 big groups. So there are many different also subtypes, but I would say important for the physician and for the patient to know where I am. Is it indolent? So it's good mastocytosis, but we are going into the symptoms. So we monitor also the amount of mast cells in this patients, or it's really aggressive. It means severe. The patients are in danger, but good to know that the severe forms of mastocytosis, these are rare forms of mastocytosis. So that's why we are usually, and that's why we are mostly talking about indolent systemic mastocytosis, mastocytosis, almost a synonym of mastocytosis in adults, because this is the most frequent form, but with a huge variability of the symptoms. Again, why? Mostly because of this point mutation, that somehow the mast cells are being a little bit different from the healthy mast cells, and they are just always activated and live their life.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really helpful to set the scene. And Shauna, we sometimes, and Polina has sort of explained that there about the variability, and we sometimes hear it referred to as a spectrum condition. What does that spectrum actually look like in real life for patients living with the disease?
Well, I feel like for many patients, the spectrum kind of describes unpredictability and the intense symptoms that are triggered by like heat, smell, certain foods. We're affected in many ways between the physical, the neurological, the psychological. So the physical, a lot of us get, flushing, hives, chronic bone pain, diarrhea, reoccurrent anaphylaxis. Then we have the neurological, which is going to be like the brain fog, the irritability, the memory issues. I took notes because of the memory issues. Difficulty concentrating. That's why I'm looking down.
That's okay. I've got mine too.
Yeah. So, and then of course, the biggest thing is like the fear of the unpredictability, like in your mind, like you don't know what's going to trigger you. So then you kind of have a little PTSD of like, if I go and do this, is this something going to trigger it? Or so the unpredictability is the biggest things for us.
Yeah, I think that was something I was struck with when we did the special edition, was actually the huge impact, and I know we'll come to it a bit later, about living with that unpredictability. And sort of, obviously you had a 12-year diagnostic odyssey, so reflecting back on that, what were kind of the first signs and symptoms that made you realise something, maybe wasn't quite right before sort of mastocytosis was mentioned to you as a possible diagnosis?
Well, I kind of look back to when I was younger, and the heat and the sun issues and the rashes, somebody would always find an excuse to dismiss these things. And then for me, over the years, I had a lot of ER trips. And they would say, oh, it's food poisoning. Well, no, it wasn't food poisoning. It was anaphylaxis to whatever situation was going on at the time. I really wasn't, you trust everybody. We're in the generation that we just trust the doctors know more than we know. So we kind of roll with it. And, I started having reactions to foods, to smells, to everything. And they never really put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Mm. So from a clinical perspective, Polina, what are the sort of common early clues? And obviously Shauna's mentioned a few there, but maybe you can kind of broaden that out, that sort of dermatologists, hematologists, allergists, who of course are also sometimes involved, or even GPs, what are the sort of things that they should be on the lookout to make them think this could be mastocytosis?
Yeah. This is also, I think, what reflects also was what Sean already mentioned. We need to sensitize also physicians to be able to recognize this major symptoms. And what we already have heard, this anaphylaxis or severe allergic reactions, this is one of these things. So we know that the patients, statistically, I think this is even up to 50% of the patients have mentioned that could have experienced anaphylaxis, especially when we know that there could be insects. If the patient there was a stung, and then this is the most prevalent trigger in this case. And what also physician can do, and there even more education should be done there. Every patient with anaphylaxis, also the tryptase level can be looked at this patient, and then I think we will also be able to diagnose these patients much more earlier because of this level of tryptase. I think maybe for diagnostics we also come back on the later stage, yeah. But clinically, anaphylaxis is so every second patient have maybe experienced this, so this should be taken seriously, and the triggers should be asked. Then, if the physician is not an allergist, then the patient should be also sent to an allergist, or at least, again, to avoid this long story after, because what Shona also explains, it makes a huge impact on the patients, because once, I could imagine, once someone experienced anaphylaxis, of course you are afraid all the time, and especially when you don't know what you expect, and then you go into the internet and try to look about anaphylaxis, the triggers, then I think you're even more afraid, and then you come to the physician. If he's not really very convinced what is it, then you are even more afraid. So, and then you have this, then it's also impact you. So this is just anaphylaxis. And we know that in mastocytosis, we have also another phenotypes. We have also skin lesions. So then maybe also it's good to once undress the patient, look at the skin, also what maybe not every physician is doing. We as dermatologists, we doing it always, but I could imagine also that if you come to a hematologist, it's not the first thing that what will be done. And I think the third thing also, what we need to think about it is severe osteoporosis. So we know that every third patient could have osteoporosis, and especially when this is something unspecific. So this is a young man with very severe osteoporosis who experienced many fractures. That's something unusual. So that's something further the investigation should be done. So there are three, and then we have the fourth, GI symptoms. Also, everything and in the end, we need that the patient says that my symptoms are getting better. So if the patient also have diarrhea, and all investigations was done, nothing was being identified, but the patient has still symptoms, so this also needs to be addressed, and that means that also further diagnostics need to be addressed. And finally, this fifth pool, this neurological symptoms, this is really difficult, I would say, but I think that when we really try to put the dots together, so then we will see that there are rarely patients who have just neurological symptoms. So you need to ask for anaphylaxis, allergic reactions. You need to look at the skin. You need to investigate what is with the bones. You need also to ask about gastrointestinal symptoms. And somehow then you will see this big picture, and mastocytosis then comes in play, and then you can treat this condition.
Shauna, did you want to add something there?
One thing that is very important is that SM patients do not present typically the same as other people in anaphylaxis, and they don't seem to understand that. I have a personal experience of going to the ER, and the nurse wanted to argue with me that I wasn't anaphylactic. So we are not the typical patient.
That's good comment, Shona. That's really great, because what we also see, we know that their anaphylaxis by mastocytosis mostly is present without skin involvement. Yeah, we know that other people have also wheals, so there's some whealing on the skin, but by mastocytosis, usually, as there are too many mast cells, the main cell for why we get anaphylaxis, it's goes direct into the heart. Yeah, so it's also usually also blood pressure drops down, the pulse also, so but not the wheals. And this is also maybe not very typical for other anaphylaxis, but it means directly that this is really severe. Yeah, so this we know that the anaphylaxis can be also with other systemic symptoms, with diarrhea, so it all comes together, and also with the patients should be gone to the hospital immediately.
So two follow-up questions there. One is, does the episodic nature of it, because patients aren't always feeling unwell, it's trigger-based, does that make it more difficult to get onto the right pathway for care, and for this to even be identified as something and not just a one-off, GI issue or something? And then also, as a follow-up to that, have you got any insight into which pathway patients tend to come through? Is it typically through dermatology? Is it usually through a more GI referral? Or, what's your insights into that, Polina?
Yeah, I'm a dermatologist, so we know that skin involvement for now, I think in the literature, it's being mentioned as the most prevalent symptom in mastocytosis. But why? Because we can see it. So this is also, I would say, we also can be biased. Severe anaphylaxis also is being seen as a sign of mastocytosis, but when it's also really very severe, because we also don't check, for example, for mastocytosis in patients with any kind of anaphylaxis. We just now say that with the grade 3, so starting from really severe anaphylaxis, also when there are insect allergy known by the patient, when maybe tryptase someone was measured and it's high, then we think about mastocytosis. But not everyone is screened about this. So that's why I think it's also could be a little bit underdiagnosed. But I think that allergists now also start checking for tryptase in these cases. But again, not in every clinic, not in every country. What is difficult for now, but I'm positive about I would say next steps that we start seeing more patients with isolated osteoporosis or gastrointestinal symptoms. But here is huge underdiagnosis for sure, because they it's not the first diagnosis to think about it, and awareness is not really high enough in these cases. Yeah, with osteoporosis, gastrointestinal symptoms, and as an example, for example, last week I had a patient with who was by gastroenterologist, and after 60 you need to check colonoscopy is being done, so it was just a really checkup, and then the mast cells with biopsy were found, and then we looked at the KIT mutation, and she has mastocytosis. No symptoms, absolutely nothing. Tryptase 7. So it was. I think that there is. We will be very interested to find out more in the future. I think about mastocytosis, and we always say it's a rare disorder. Yeah, we will. Hope we will talk in, I don't know, 5-10 years and discuss this story from the rare to not. Who knows?